For the first time since Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom were kidnapped and killed in January 2007, we finally not only heard what happened to them, but we saw it. It was graphic and intense. The families cried. Shannon's best friend left the courtroom at one point. Latavius Cobbins covered his face, rocked a little bit. Shannon's father kept his eyes on Latavius Cobbins the entire time. In the courtroom today for Latavius Cobbins' trial in what was expected to be the state's last witness, our Knox County's chief medical examiner, Dr. Darinka Malusnik-Polchin, showed photographs of the injuries that Shannon and Chris suffered. She also described their deaths and what happened to them leading up to death.
It entered again at an angle, and it goes from right to left and downward. That particular bullet entered the brain and damaged the right side of the right hemisphere of the brain, and then severed the brainstem. That's the injury, that was the deadly injury. That's the injury that killed Mr. Newsom.
His hands were tied behind his back. His ankles were bound with a belt. There was a sock, probably his own socks, stuffed in his mouth, and then a shoestring, his own shoestrings, tied around that sock to keep it in his mouth. He was blindfolded, and then a shirt placed over his head. He was either carried or more likely led out to some railroad tracks near the Chipman Street house where they were held captive in January 2007. He was shot 3 times. He was on his back and dead when his body was set on fire. The judge took a break after that very intense testimony. When we came back, we learned what happened to Shannon. She died with her eyes open, and that was a very chilling photograph that jurors saw.
It shows how cyanotic, almost kind of purple-blue her face is because of the asphyxia, lack of oxygen, relatively slow death. The impression here is, again, from being pressed against the garbage can, side of the garbage can. And also there are some pressure marks on her nose. Her eyes remained open, and that's why you can see some darkening, which is a drying artifact in the eyes.
Her injuries came over several hours, as much as 12 to even 24 hours. The medical examiner could not pinpoint an exact time of death, but she could say that Shannon was, for instance, raped fairly early on, and then hours may have passed and she was raped again. There were injuries showing that not only was she the victim of what the medical examiner termed a simple rape, her lower body was actually subjected to blunt force trauma.
The photograph was taken as is when the body arrived to the office and without any cleaning, prior cleaning. So this is just to show where the blood is coming from. This is the blood that is coming from the injury to the anogenital region. There is bruising around the anus, there is bruising around the vagina, but most importantly, there's extensive bruising, it's not actually almost, but it's hematoma formation in the skin around that anogenital region, meaning hematoma is accumulation of blood. I can basically scoop it out like a blood clot from the tissue. So it's not just bleeding into the tissue, it's a blood clot that created a pocket in the tissue, and I'm seeing it on both sides. So we're looking at the right buttock here, left buttock here, and I'm looking at the right and left so-called perineum with bruising and lots of abrasions. So as you can tell, the skin is already breaking down, so this is not just your usual intercourse or rape. This is much more than that.
What causes a hematoma?
It's a blunt trauma. So what I'm looking here is not just a simple rape. If I see a simple rape, it's going to be some injury in the vaginal introitus, vagina, maybe rectum. What I'm seeing here is just true blunt trauma beating, that's heavy object coming in contact with the body.
which means that she was kicked in her vaginal region, she may have been punched in her vaginal region, and it would have been an attack that spanned a good amount of time. A white plastic grocery bag you might get at Kroger was placed over her head. She was stuffed inside this trash can. Medical examiner said she would have suffocated within an hour. Surprisingly, the jurors did not show much reaction to any of this. A male juror flinched and covered his face at the photograph of Chris Newsom's anal injuries, but recovered fairly quickly. A female juror gasped and covered her mouth when we saw the first photograph of Shannon's body outside the trash can when she was still hogtied, but again, quickly recovered. We've seen no other reaction from them. After an afternoon recess, Prosecutor Takesha Fitzgerald started her direct examination of Knox County Medical Examiner Dr. Darinka Malusnik-Polchan on the manner and cause of Shannon Christian's death. And what we saw there was, of course, evidence of a very prolonged attack. Chris would have been dead within a couple of hours. Shannon's injuries, according to the doctor, occurred with a good measure of time between them. She indicated that Shannon had suffered blows to the head at some point. She had been grabbed. Her arms had been grabbed by someone forcefully enough to cause bruising. She was forced to perform oral sex with such force that it tore her upper lip. She also suffered carpet burns to the back, bruising to the shoulders. She was raped vaginally, anally, and then at some point was repeatedly kicked in the vaginal area.
Well, in this particular case, histologically, I could say that one injury is older than the other. For example, the frenulum happened before the last insult in the anogenital region, which was that area of severe beating. And the cut on the hand didn't show any bowel reaction, so that happened around the time of that, which means that what we call peri-mortem, around the time she died.
Prosecutor Fitzgerald again presented some hypotheticals.
Dr. Malusnik, again, I would ask, based upon your training, your experience, your expertise, I would like to ask you a series of hypothetical questions. If expert from TBI has testified, expert from TBI has testified that this area with the black magic marker is semen, sperm, on the lower left leg of the pants, would that be consistent with Miss Christian in a seated position with sperm in her mouth, leaning forward and spitting the sperm out?
Yes, it could be consistent.
What effect could bleach have on sperm?
Well, the bleach would be destructive
How so?
because of the chemical properties and the influence on the bonds in the DNA.
Okay, let me ask you one more question. And again, Dr. Malusnik, if Jennifer Millsaps with TBI has testified that the inside of the camisole, underneath the breast portion, in between the breast, and this spot on the sweater right in here tested positive for Latavas Cobbins DNA. And this spot here on the inner left thigh tested positive for Latavas Cobbins DNA. Would that be consistent with Miss Christian in a seated position with sperm in her mouth, spitting it out, it getting into the inside of the bra, inside the camisole, settling in the bra portion of the camisole, and getting on the front of her sweater and the inner left thigh?
It's consistent. It could be one of the ways, yes.
And then again, on the back of the Big Star jeans, there is some DNA that is consistent with Miss Christian's DNA. Would that be consistent with a cut hand that is bleeding, touching the back of her pants in that area and leaving blood?
It could be.
If her hands were tied, would that also be consistent?
Sure.
And also, inside in the interior of the jeans, Ms. Millsaps found DNA that is consistent with Mr. Davidson in the crotch area. Would that be consistent again with Mr. Davidson's sperm being inside Ms. Christian in her vaginal area or her anal area, and then putting the pants back on after Mr. Davidson deposited semen in her vagina and her anus?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's put these back.
The photos from the autopsy were played out on a large movie-sized screen, almost play-by-play. Every, as each layer of binding is removed and as each trash bag is removed, there's a new photo and close-up shots. And they're very graphic, and they were so graphic, in fact, that a new prosecutor who's assisting in this case grew faint early on into the autopsy presentation of Shannon Christian's death.
And at 23:16.
Down.
We have a doctor in that.
And so we had to take a break in order to help her to recover. She did not return to the courtroom, however.
Again, with Ms. Christian, did you collect urine, blood, and vitreous samples?
Yes.
And did you send those off to Tennessee Bureau of Investigation?
Yes.
What was the test results?
The only finding was a trace amount of alcohol, 0.01.
Was she tested for barbiturates,
Yes.
benzodiazepine,
Yes.
cannabinoid,
Yes, that's marijuana, cannabinoids, yes.
cocaine,
Yes.
opiates,
Yes.
and again, the results, no basic drugs?
That was all negative, yes.
Tomorrow, the defense will start cross-examination of the medical examiner, and clearly they've got a big hurdle to jump with her testimony. Day 5 in the Americus Davidson capital murder trial began today with a packed courtroom. People apparently had filed in once they learned that the Knox County Medical Examiner, Dr. Darinka Malusnik-Polchan, was going to take the stand. It gave the atmosphere, a bit of a macabre feel, like people turning out to stare at a train wreck, or because there were some really horrific images today. It's clearly very hard on the family. They've seen it once before in the trial of Davidson's brother, Latavas Cobbins, but it didn't appear to get any easier, and in fact, it may have been a little worse. Dr. Malusnik began with the autopsy of Chris Newsom. She began her testimony with a horrific shot of Chris's burned body spread out in front of the nearby railroad tracks that were near the Chipman Street house that Davidson lived in. What she told jurors is that Chris was bound, gagged, his ankles were bound. He was forced to walk barefoot for some period of time over dirt and gravel. He was raped at least an hour, she said, before his death. Sometime after that rape, and other testimony indicates it would have been around 1:45 a.m. Dr. Malusnik said that Chris was, of course, taken outside, forced to walk barefoot, and then shot 3 times, one to the back, one to the neck, and one to the head.
The photograph depicts the body as is, the way it was found at the scene. The train tracks, of course, are running in this upper part of the photograph, and you can see that the body was found face up. The upper part of the body severely charred. There were some clothing items and some wrap cloth or piece of clothing that it's over the face. And you can also observe that the lower part of the body doesn't really have any garments. It looks like there was nothing there covering the legs. In the ankle region, there was a leather belt, in addition to some other strip of either a bed sheet. And you can see that one of the arms is bent and under the body. The other one is twisted. Part of this position and the contractures that happen in the joints is because of the generated heat. So I can tell just by the way the contractures occurred in the knees and elbows that the body was subject to very high heat for some time as it was burning. Of course, this was a consequence of fire that engulfed the body for some time following death, and we'll discuss that later.
What about photo number 219?
Now, close-up of the ankle and the feet area. You can see better now the belt securing the ankle. It was twisted and actually wrapped around the ankles twice, in addition to the cloth, partially charred cloth piece of the torn bed sheet that was also securing ankles at one point.
Spot number 220?
The upper part of the body, again, you can see there was much more charring and burning that happened in the upper part of the body. As you can remember, the ankles were spared, so that means that whatever the body was wrapped in did not cover the ankles originally. You can also notice that some clothing items were still preserved here as opposed to the legs that were completely uncovered, and the blistering or charring of these blister indicates that there was an extremely high heat that was generated in burning the body for some time.
Number 221?
Now this is the close-up of the head area. The face would be pointing in this direction. The back of the head would be here top, and the neck area. And you can also see that the head is completely wrapped in some sort of garment that it's quite burned. The blood is actually seeping from the injury in the head region.
And what about this area right here?
That was actually covering the part of the head that there was a defect that appeared to be that potentially could be a gunshot wound, and we'll see that later. It was during transportation, also during the scene examination, was examined, and it turned out to be actually a gunshot wound to the head area.
One of the things that Prosecutor Takesha Fitzgerald did today with Dr. Malusnik's testimony was to outline some scenarios of what may well have happened to these two victims. Fitzgerald was able to sort of recreate what the doctor says could have happened based on the trajectory of the bullets and the wounds.
That would create free access to the lumbar area without the arms being in the way.
And would that explain the steep angle of that bullet in the back?
Yes, the body bent to this position would fulfill the requirements for the trajectory that I described, yes.
And again, as you, I think as I've heard you testify in the past, the body is dynamic.
Absolutely, and any shooting scene is very dynamic, yes.
Is it possible to recreate an entire, I guess, murder scene exactly?
Well, not unless we have a video, we have witnesses, and of course, we know that this is a plausible position, whether now Mr. Newsom is bent and stationary or running away. I mean, I could not really tell that from the autopsy.
What were the results of his blood sample?
The results on the blood demonstrated presence of amphetamine in the concentration of 0.16 micrograms per milliliter. Also, there was a trace alcohol level of 0.01 gram percent. And the last test was for marijuana or 9-carboxy 11-or-delta THC, which is marijuana metabolite, and that was 18.9 nanograms per milliliter.
Is that a lot?
That's amount that we can see in occasional users. Frequently, in addition to that, we look at the urine level, and they can tell us if it's a recent use or it could be potentially some past use.
Was he also tested for the presence of cocaine?
Yes. In Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, in general, tests for many drugs of abuse, including also many medications that can be abused, and the rest of it was negative.
Can you run through what all was negative?
Yes, the report stated that the barbiturates, frequently many sleeping pills, the barbiturates, benzodiazepines, which are tranquilizers, cocaine, and opiates, and that's a range of opiates that they can test for, they were all negative.
And did you prepare the certificate of death for Mr. Newsom?
Yes.
And what was your conclusion as to the cause and manner of death?
The main cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, and the manner of death was homicide.
Life is about opportunities and the decisions that you make when you're presented with those opportunities. Clearly, the defendant had a rough childhood. Mama was on crack, had unstable home life, but that does not excuse, that does not justify the decisions that he made the first weekend of January 2007. His very own sister had that same rough life. She had that same mama who was on dope. She had that same mama who was not able to provide her with a stable home life. What did his sister make of the opportunities that were presented to her in her life? She didn't finish school. She went and got a GED. She didn't let that stop her. She still made something of herself. She got her a job working in a veterinarian clinic. She didn't just sit back and say, oh, because I come from a bad background, my past is who I am. She made something of her life. Same thing with his uncle, Mr. Wilbur. He had a rough life. He didn't finish school. He had dope problems. He didn't let that define him. He took responsibility for his life. He took advantage of the opportunities that were given to him. He went to the military. He went to the army. He made something of his life. He had dope problems. He didn't let that get him down. He didn't just say, oh my goodness, I've got dope problems, I've relapsed and I can't do anything, and that justifies all the bad decisions that I make for the rest of my life. Didn't do that. defendant had more opportunities than either of those two. Because yes, he had a bad life, a rough life. But at age 16, he was given something that the other two didn't have. And that was two families that cared about him. The Rays, Mr. and Mrs. Ray, starting at age 16, the defendant had a stable home life. He had parents who didn't do dope, parents that cared about him. He had a male role model in his life. He didn't have to work. All he had to do was go to school and do the right thing. And then at age 17, he got even a greater opportunity. He got moved into a middle-class lifestyle. Big house, 5 bedrooms, a little brother. Parents, they gave him everything. Didn't have to work, went to private school. Just obey the rules, Mr. Davidson. Don't have dope in the house. Just obey the rules. Don't ever say that you were never given a chance, because when you come to live here, you'll be given that chance. And what did he do with that opportunity? Violated the rules. Wanted to make his own decisions. Brought dope in the house. What did the Rudds do? Did they kick him out? No. Gave him another chance. I understand, Mr. Davis, you had a rough background. I understand why you violated the rules. I'll give you another chance. What does he do again when he gets another opportunity? Breaks the rules again. They send him back to live with the Rays. And again, these folks don't give up on him. It's not like they say, listen, forget it. You violated the rules. That's it. Cutting my losses. Don't care about you anymore. Don't contact me. They still stayed in contact with him. They still supported him. So he's living with the Rays. He's got this man, Mr. Brumley, that supports him, that invites him to his wedding. And what does he do? What does he do with that opportunity? He shows them all when he goes out and commits an aggravated robbery. And he goes to the penitentiary. And while he's sitting in the penitentiary for 6 years, these folks, they still don't leave him. They're still there with him. They're still supporting him. Sending him money, sending him letters, calling him, taking his phone calls, visiting him. They don't leave him. They still give him the opportunities that other people in his life didn't have. And then when it comes time for parole, what happens? Miss Ray goes to the parole board. She goes to the parole hearing and speaks on his behalf. Listen, my husband can't be here. He's down there helping some other people, down in Hurricane Katrina. My husband's got a business, and the defendant can have all the work that he wants. And what does he do with that opportunity, ladies and gentlemen? In the summer of 2006, what does he do with that opportunity? Works there for a little while until he wants to make his own choices. And he comes to Knoxville to sell dope. To sell dope. He knows that the problems dope has on people's lives. He's experienced it. And now he's out selling it. And the same opportunities that he's had his entire life continued that weekend in January 2007. While Chris is there bound, gagged, blindfolded, with 2 bullets in his back, paralyzed, he had the opportunity to walk away. He had everything that Chris owned. He had his shoes, his cap, his girlfriend. He had everything that Chris could possibly have, with the exception of Chris's life, with the exception of Chris's knowledge of who his attacker was. That's all Chris had, was the knowledge of who his attackers were, the love of his family, that promise that he had made to his mama. That's all Chris had. And the defendant took that. And it didn't end there. The opportunities for the defendant continued across the street with Miss Christian, whose freedom had been taken by the defendant, whose boyfriend had been taken by the defendant, whose body had been taken by the defendant. The only thing that she had left was her life and the knowledge of who her attacker was, the knowledge of who the attacker of her boyfriend was. And it was something, I don't know what it was something about the defendant that caused Miss Christian to believe him. I guess the same thing that Miss Rudd saw when she saw the defendant at that basketball game. There was something about him when she posed that question to him. Am I going to live? I don't want to die. A good liar doesn't tell you that the sky is green. There's a little bit of truth mixed in that statement that he gave. It's full of lies. It's a little bit of truth. Am I going to live? I don't want to die. He had everything that this young lady could possibly have. There was absolutely no reason to take her life. None whatsoever. And he took it. And the only reason, ladies and gentlemen, that he took her life was because of what she knew. Again, back to the statement. What does he say in the statement? He knew that she was not going to live because she came in the house with no blindfold on. She could identify everybody. The last 2 weeks, you've heard evidence, the law. There are 8 aggravating factors that we have proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt. We ask you to find that. We ask you to consider that the mitigating circumstances. However, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter how bad your background is. Just because when you were 2 or 8 and your mama smoking crack, that does not excuse the decisions that you make when you're 26. When you decide to take the lives of 2 kids for no reason.
I walked through the crime scene just to see what all there was there and what, just trying to get a mental picture of what had occurred. And then I went to my van and got my video camera and recorded the scene as best I could. The scene is secured because most of the people are standing on the outside of the house. That's Lance Curtis, Investigator Larry Vineyard. And this is that front porch. We saw the pictures of the cartridge cases.
Yes, sir.
This is going back into the living room. And there are the items under the window again. And you can see back in the kitchen. There's the Sears bag that was just there, and then the Sears bag again. That's going back out to the front porch. And we're in the front bedroom now, the bedroom closest to Chipman Street. And there are those scales and the ice tray and the magazine. There's that plastic container. And there again is the magazine. And that's going into the bathroom. And now we're in the south bedroom. That is a closet where they looked for up in the attic. And that's, again, the closet, the panel that was taken out to get into the attic. And your refrigerator again with a gas can beside it. And there's the bottle of bleach cleaner and the red solution. And the garbage bag and the garbage can. And there's the belt and the white glove. And there's a garbage can. And there's her arm. That's how it was when we found it. Now we're going back out to the utility room. And the two garbage bags again.
Coming up, we're looking back at one of the most horrific murder cases in East Tennessee history. 18 years ago, we first heard the names Shannon Christian and Chris Newsom. Since their brutal deaths, their families have shared their stories, so they'll never be forgotten. Today, we're looking back at the crimes that impacted these two families and what they did to help future crime victims and protect other families from similar pain.
10 News is sponsored by Premier Family of Dealerships. 10 About Town on WBIR starts now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brittany Bailey. It is one of the most shocking and horrifying murder cases to ever happen in East Tennessee, one that took 2 young lives full of promise and put their families through 8 criminal trials. The tragic murders shocked the community and the families of these 2 young victims. 21-year-old Shannon Christian attended the University of Tennessee. Her boyfriend, Chris Newsom, was a 23-year-old former Halls High School baseball standout. Armed men carjacked and killed them just a few days into the new year of 2007. 2 young lives were lost and 2 families were forever changed. We do have a warning. The details of this case may not be suitable for some of you. It all started on a Saturday night, January 6, 2007. Shannon Christian and her boyfriend Chris Newsom were planning to hang out and watch movies before going to a party later in the evening. Friends last saw them alive around 9 p.m. Not long after, the pair was carjacked in Shannon's 4Runner from a North Knoxville apartment complex. 3 men took them, brothers LaMarcus Davidson and Latalvis Cobbins and Eric Boyd. The carjackers blindfolded them and drove them in Shannon's 4Runner to Davidson's rented house on Chipman Street, just about 3 miles from the apartment complex. According to the investigation, Chris Newsom was raped an hour or 2 before his death. In his final moments, he was marched barefoot to a nearby railroad track. He was shot 3 times in the neck, back, and head. The killers had stuffed a sock in his mouth, tied his wrists and ankles, and covered his head with a sweatshirt tied around his neck with shoestrings. His body was doused in gasoline and set on fire. A railroad employee found his body the next afternoon near the tracks. Shannon was brutally tortured and raped in multiple ways. DNA evidence suggests she was raped by Cobbins and Davidson. She was hit in the head, and bleach was used in her mouth and vaginal area to try to destroy DNA evidence. She was hogtied and put in a garbage bag while still alive, with her head wrapped in a second garbage bag. She suffocated to death. On January 9th, Knoxville police stormed the home on Chipman Street after a fingerprint found in Shannon's Toyota led them there. That's where they found her body, stuffed in a garbage can in the kitchen. By then, the suspects had fled, and the search was on to find them. There would be 2 additional names added to that list of suspects in the murders of Shannon Christian and Chris Newsom. In all, 5 people were charged with multiple counts. LaMarcus Davidson was known as Slim. He was the crime ringleader and 25 years old at the time.
The punishment is death.
He's now on death row in Nashville. His brother, Latalvis Cobbins, was 24 years old when the murders happened. Jurors convicted him of rape, murder, and facilitation of murder. He's serving a life sentence with no chance at parole. DNA from both of the brothers was found on Shannon's body. Eric Boyd was the oldest of the suspects. He was 35 years old at the time. He and Davidson had served time together in prison. He also was the only suspect to not face state charges initially. Instead, a federal jury convicted him of being an accessory to carjacking. 24-year-old George Thomas, a friend of Cobbins's, was a weekend guest at the Chipman Street home. His attorneys argued he was homeless at the time of the killings and that he was not a willing participant. Thomas, though, was found guilty of 38 counts by a jury in Hamilton County. Vanessa Coleman was 18 years old and was dating Cobbins at the time of the killings. An out-of-county jury found her guilty of facilitation in Shannon Christian's murder, along with kidnapping and rape, but she was found not guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 53 years in prison, but after a November 2012 retrial, a different jury convicted her on similar but lesser charges, and she was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Those 5 suspects are all guilty for their various roles in the kidnapping, rapes, and murders. 2 young people who had their whole lives ahead of them were taken far too soon. Shannon and Chris had just started dating in November of 2006, a few months before their deaths. But Mary Newsom told us her son adored Shannon. Shannon Gale Christian was a senior majoring in sociology at the University of Tennessee. The 2003 Farragut High School graduate was popular with an engaging smile and loved to play golf. She would have turned 40 years old this April. Shannon Christian's boyfriend, Chris Newsom, was 23 years old. He worked as a carpenter. He had been a baseball standout at Halls High School. He was a pitcher and outfielder. His mom says as a baby, his pediatrician told her Chris would be an athlete. She says he was that and then some. He loved all kinds of sports. He graduated in 2002 and attended Pellissippi State. He had 2 older sisters and an older brother. Dad Hugh tells us his son was a talented carpenter whose crown molding is featured in some of the homes in Knox County. Chris would have turned 42 in September. The torture slayings thrust the Christian and Newsom families into the spotlight when the initial frantic search began to find the missing couple. It was Shannon's parents and friends who found her abandoned 4Runner near Chipman Street thanks to a search party they had put together. And since the early days of this tragic story, East Tennessee has stood behind both families, from their close friends and relatives to people they've never met. Gary and Dina Christian were perhaps the parents remembered most. It's hard to forget Gary's emotions during the trials. The couple has since divorced. Gary is now married to Lori. We'll have more with the families coming up a little later. Now, all these years later, it's a lot trying to keep track of the suspects, their trials, and their sentences. What we do know is this. On January 11, 2007, authorities arrested Lamarcus Davidson, LaTalvis Cobbins, George Thomas, Eric Boyd, and Vanessa Coleman. Their trials would follow in the next 2 years. LaTalvis Cobbins was the first to go on trial on state charges in 2009. Cobbins was convicted on multiple charges, including first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. Next up was the trial for his half-brother, Lamarcus Davidson, the ringleader. Davidson was found guilty on all counts and was sentenced to death in October of 2009. In December of that same year, George Thomas was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Vanessa Coleman, who was dating Cobbins at the time, was found guilty of facilitation of Shannon Christian's murder, kidnapping, and rape. She was acquitted on murder charges, though, and sentenced to 53 years in prison, with a later retrial reducing her sentence to 35 years. Of the 5 suspects, Eric Boyd's case perhaps stands out the most. First, he was the oldest of the 5 suspects, 35 at the time. He was the only suspect to not face state charges at first. Instead, he was found guilty in federal court of being an accessory to kidnapping by hiding Davidson after the killings. And he was convicted in federal court before the others went on trial in state court. The families, in particular the Newsoms, always thought Boyd played a larger role in their son's murder, but prosecutors at first said they didn't have the evidence to pursue a murder charge against him. But Boyd was eventually indicted in state court and convicted in 2019 of 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with rape and kidnapping. That same year, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 90 years. After those initial convictions, talk of the crimes settled down just a bit. But then the unthinkable happened. A scandal in the Knox County courts would lead to retrials for some of the suspects. More on that coming up after this. In January of 2011, the late Judge Richard Baumgardner, who oversaw the initial state cases, stepped down after authorities learned he used his position as head of drug court to get pills for his own addiction. As a result, 2 of the Chipman Street cases were retried. In November of 2011, retrials were granted for George Thomas, LaTalvis Cobbins, and Vanessa Coleman. In the end, legal challenges meant Cobbins would not be retried, so that left 2 retrials. In November of 2012, Vanessa Coleman was up first to be tried for a second time. She was again convicted, but this time on lesser charges, with her new sentence 35 years. George Thomas was retried in May of 2013 and sentenced on every one of the same charges. He was given life in prison with the possibility of parole after 51 years. As for the other 3 suspects who did not get retrials, Cobbins is serving life without parole in West Tennessee. Davidson is on death row in Nashville. In 2016, the Tennessee Supreme Court upheld his conviction and sentence. As for Eric Boyd, in 2019 in state court, he was tried and convicted of murder and sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences plus 90 years. These days, Hugh and Mary Newsom live a quiet life full of family, including grandchildren. They say they're grateful to those who remember Chris and try to keep his memory alive. Mary says seeing cardinals and butterflies are reminders of Chris being with them. The Newsoms sat down with anchor Robin Wilhoit recently to discuss their son and the trial for the man they believed all along was his killer, Eric Boyd.
How did you make it through that process, that gruesome process of having to hear over and over again?
Well, I just had a gut feeling that Eric Boyd was the one that killed him. And I wasn't going to let Eric get away with it. And to get the stuff that we needed, we had to get somebody to tell us that Eric Boyd was involved. So we went ahead and tried, went down to the prison in Nashville and spoke to him. What was his name there?
Was it
Cobbins.
Cobbins, yeah, Cobbins, and asked him if he would volunteer to come back and you know, talk about Eric Boyd, and he said he would, and that, but he, you know, he needed to have permission and everything, so we went down there again in December with the prosecutor, and that when we got back there, he lied about it, said he wouldn't do it. So that kind of left us without anything to go on. Well, we had a friend that called us, and he said, don't give up, he said, because you still got another one that you can go to. He said, don't give up now. So he really encouraged us. He would call us every evening and give us encouragement. He said, go and get another one to talk about him.
George Thomas.
And so he went and testified. But we had to get permission, you know, through the DA's office and everything. So we went through a lot to you know, be able to get him. But we finally did. And when they had to do the trial, I remember I was sitting there, you know, waiting for the verdict and just hoping that it would be a guilty verdict on him. And when they said guilty, I cried. I was so happy that I just cried. And when he walked out of that courtroom, he turned to me and he said, I'll get you. And I thought, no, buddy, I got you. You know, you're not going to get me now.
Shannon was a beautiful girl, and Chris was just carried away with her. I mean, he really liked her. You can tell with those pictures.
And the joy you could see
Yeah.
on their faces is pure joy to be together.
I think he had finally found a girl that he was really interested in, and I think they would have got married.
And one thing that sticks in their mind is that song, What Would He Be Today? We'll never know.
You can see Robin's full interview on the WBIR YouTube channel. We also talked with the Christian family. Gary and Dina Christian divorced, and Gary has since remarried and become a public speaker. Many, though, remember Gary for his emotional reactions to the testimony during the course of so many trials. Recently, he and I had a chance to talk about how he remembers his daughter. Gary, I want to talk about, first of all, just tell us again about Shannon in your own words.
She was spoiled. She was happy. She's beautiful. I don't know where she got her looks from, but it wasn't me. She loved life, that's for sure. She was a Christian. She couldn't stand drugs. Wouldn't be around them. Even if it was somebody she was pretty close to. If they were doing something, she was out of there. she cared about people. Her best friend's mom passed away. Never will forget this. We were in Louisiana at my mother's house, mother and dad's house, and when I went to bed, she was talking to Kara. And when I woke up the next morning, she was talking to Kara. If she considered you a friend, she was a friend. She didn't turn her back. She didn't change horses in the middle of the stream, in other words. She, if you were her friend, you were her friend. And
Do you remember the last time you saw her or talked to her?
mm-hmm. Yeah. She came down the stairs and she said, "Bye, Dad, I love you." And we had this thing. I said, she said, "I'm going to work. And I'm going over to Kara's when I get off. We got a birthday party to go to." I said, "All right, baby, be careful. And I love you more." And she said, "No, I love you more." And I heard her come back towards the front door. And when she went out the door, she said, "I love you more," and slammed the door. So she won that battle. That was the last time.
We had hoped this week to speak with Gary's ex-wife, Shannon's mother, Dina. Unfortunately, she was under the weather and couldn't meet up with us, but she did say that this is a very hard time of year for her. Oh, the brutal killings of Shannon and Chris are just as fresh in the minds of those who covered the case at the time. So joining me now to talk more about this are anchor John Becker, investigative reporter John North. This has been something that has touched our community for almost 2 decades now.
I was talking to a friend of ours in the media, and she said, this stopped parents in their tracks. It changed the way they parented. It changed the way all of us thought about the safety of our community. It's hard to stress now in this world of news everywhere just how rapt our attention was on this case in terms of the entire community.
When it first happened, it was like this very dark cloud sort of came over the community. Go away because of the ongoing prosecutions and then the retrials. I'll be honest with you, it's been a couple of years since I have spent much time thinking about it. I have thought about it a lot in the last week, and it's gut-wrenching yet again.
And in speaking about gut-wrenching terms, we know colleagues who really had to pull away from journalism because of this case, or their lives took a different turn, in part because of this case. It was that impactful. Specifically, the details that you listened to in court and that we dealt with on a daily basis.
Yeah, to be honest, when I was here the first time covering some of the trials, I sort of stepped into a role because one of our colleagues needed to step away from it. And I think, again, anybody who's covered this, as you said, just remembers those details. There were pictures shown, there were details mentioned in testimony that we'll never forget. Of course, seeing Gary Christian specifically, and that's something that we talked about. We all remember sort of the anger that you could just feel. It was palpable coming off of him. And I talked to him about that, and he said, it's taken him a while to sort of let go of that. And I don't know if you could tell in the interview we just saw that he is a little bit of a different person.
I think it's important, John, you brought this up, but the role that the families played in this investigation was absolutely critical. Explain some of those key details that people may not remember.
Couple things for sure. It's critical to discuss, to recognize, and for all of us to be thinking about if we have loved ones, if something horrific happens. First of all, it was Dina, Shannon's mom, because the phone was in her name, that was like, I want to try and find out where that last call came from, where she was located when the phone was last used. It
And
was
just to,
Dina.
Just to be critical on this point, this is at a time when Shannon was a captive.
That's
And-
right.
And the suspects at that time had her use the phone to try to buy some time.
That's right. And they didn't know where she was. They knew something was wrong, and through the phone company, they were able to figure out that she had last pinged near Cherry Street, which was not far at all from the Chipman Street house. The other thing is this: Shannon's Toyota 4Runner, which was used in the carjacking and which the killers and the others took to Chipman Street, nobody could find where that was. And it was the family and friends of Shannon who said, we are going to go find this. They knew Cherry Street, and so they just basically did a grid search, as they would later testify in multiple trials, and say, we're going to find this Toyota. And sometime in the middle of the night, I think on the 8th, maybe 1:30, 1:45 in the morning, they found that vehicle parked, and it proved significant to lead to other developments in that case.
And Brittany, you talked to the Newsomes about their role in going after Eric Boyd. As Chris's mom said, we really felt all along he had a key role in it. You spoke to them about it, and they advocated for themselves and their son.
They did through the years, and you heard them talking with Robin in that recent piece that we just showed. They never gave up, and they were determined. And, you know, I thought it was so interesting, the part where Mary said, as Eric Boyd was leaving the courtroom, he said something like, I'm going to get you, and she said, no, I've got you.
Yeah.
And that is just further proof that these families have tirelessly, you know, advocated for their families, and that's why also laws have changed because of them as well, which we'll be talking about in just a couple of minutes. Well, also in 2019, John North here co-hosted a podcast on Eric Boyd's state trial, and it went over the heartbreaking details of the horrible murders, and you can listen to that podcast right now on WBIR.com. And we will have more on how the families have honored Shannon and Chris coming up after this. Since the murders, the families of both Shannon and Chris have worked tirelessly to bring the murderers to justice and to help others. In June of 2014, Governor Bill Haslam signed the Chris Newsom and Shannon Christian Acts into law. Chris's bill ends the practice of the 13th juror, which had required a judge to sign a unanimous verdict. Shannon's bill prevents attorneys from using allegations from a victim's past if those allegations are not relevant to the case. The home where Shannon Christian was tortured and killed is no longer on Chipman Street. Back in 2008, Waste Connections next door bought the site and tore down the house. But there are lasting memorials to the couple all over the Knoxville area. And the families have created events in memory of both Shannon and Chris. The Newsomes created a foundation and hold the Chris Newsom Memorial Baseball Tournament every spring to honor Chris and Shannon. Mary Newsom tells us the foundation has given out 42 scholarships to Halls High School students. The Newsomes say they always hear from the scholarship recipients, and that makes them feel good. They say they think Chris would be proud of that. Shannon's family also created a foundation in her memory. The foundation was established in 2009 and has given scholarships to female Farragut High School graduates who plan to attend the University of Tennessee. It's since been opened up to be offered to students from Knox and surrounding counties who will attend UT. Most of the money is raised in a golf tournament held in her honor every year.
Shannon had just, I have a picture of me and Shannon standing on a tee box. Now this tee box was in Louisiana. She had just, well, she came out that day we were playing, small town. We were playing, and she came out with some more of my family to kind of watch us. Well, she wanted to hit a ball. So I got her on the tee box. First time she'd ever been on the tee box. Didn't know how to hold a club, nothing. And I kind of told her, just stand this way, put it in the middle of your feet, blah, blah, blah. And she knocked the ever-living fire out of one, straight as an arrow. I'd played golf with people that didn't hit the ball that far. And she thought, well, it was just a fluke. Well, she did it again. She didn't hit any of the other ones better than she hit the first one, but she hit a lot of good ones. 4 or 5 right there off of that same tee box. Fell in love with golf. Had just started to want to play. And I had got her some golf shoes. We had clubs for her to use. I got her some shoes. And she loved to watch golf. She loved to go out to the golf course and be there and watch, you know, her boyfriend or her daddy or whatever play. And she was just starting. And the first thing I ever recognized of hers when the police were showing us stuff that they had found at different places was her golf shoes.
In all, the families have given out tens of thousands of dollars in scholarships from both foundations. And again, a quick note that we did hope to speak with Dina Christian for this as well, but she was under the weather and was not able to talk with us this week. Thanks so much for watching. And a reminder, you can see more of our stories on the Christian Newsome families right now on our website, WBIR.com. And you can see our full interviews with Gary Christian and the Newsomes on WBIR.com and our YouTube page. Thanks so much for watching.